So in this video, I want to work through an exponential growth problem with you so that you learn how you can address these. Exponential growth, it comes up in all kinds of things. If you are a STEM student and not necessarily a math major, you might see it in a wildlife class, you might see it in a biology class or a chemistry class. So here, the scenario is you have a number of cells that are growing maybe in a petri dish, and we'll use a given model to answer some questions about what is happening with this specific experiment. So I just want to point out that in this problem, the model is given. I did not have to develop it. This is kind of nice. It makes the work a little bit less for us. So I highlighted it or underlined it in yellow, but I'm going to go ahead and write the model for us here. So this model is basically, it's capturing everything we want to know. Like, we know how many cells are at any time by just plugging that time value in for this. So the first question says, how many cells are present at time 0? Well, time 0 just means t is 0. So for this t, I'm going to plug in a 0, and then similarly for this t. So let me show you the steps. I'm copying my model exactly, except where I'm seeing the t instead of t, we're replacing it with the value 0. Okay, so 3 to the 4 times 0, this is the same as 4 times 0 is 0, so it's that. And we've learned that anything raised to the 0 is 1. And so we're getting back 135. Okay, so this is great information, but I also want to just tell you the shortcut, if you don't care to go through all this work, is the initial amount is always the constant that's hanging out in front of the exponential term. Now, what this is saying on the graph, we don't have a ton of other information, but this is time, and time is given to us in hours, and this is number of cells. So the model, I won't draw this to scale just because of the size of my slide, but it's telling me that my y-intercept is 0, 135. Another way of saying this is when the biology lab started the experiment, there were exactly 135 cells in my petri dish. And now the model, you could graph it perfectly if you want to use Desmos or Wolfram Alpha, but I'm going to just draw a general shape. I know it's exponential, so all exponential growth problems have this shape. We'll see a decay example where the exponent is negative later, but as long as it's growth, it's going to look something like this. It might be steeper, it might be shallower, but the shape is the same. Okay, so this is the information we have. We're going to go ahead and talk about the doubling time next, and then we'll talk about when a population will reach a certain level of cells. So to discuss the doubling time, what doubling time means is when do you have exactly twice of what you started with? Well, if you started with 135, twice 135 would be 270. So I'll just mark this on my graph so you're seeing. But it's really asking when, we have to still figure that out, does my population hit twice what it started with? So that's what doubling time means. The third question, part C, is saying when will it reach 40,000? So 40,000, I can't truly fit it on my axis. I'll just put it way up here at the top. Let's pretend that this is my 40,000 cells. It's really saying, okay, there's a point there. Figure out when, so the first coordinate, when the y coordinate is that. And then just to be clear, the purple is corresponding with this point. So those are graphically what the last two questions are asking us. So on the next slide, I will show you how to do part B to find the doubling time just using algebra. Okay, so part B says find the doubling time. And then I said this, but I think it's so important, I'd like to write it down. What doubling time means is how long to have twice what you started with. And let's just remind ourselves that we were given the following model. And we know from what we did in part A that we started with 135. And so for doubling time, we're saying when do we have 270? And I'm going to just kind of color code. So if you want to flip through the slides, you can see how the different colors are relating to the various points on the graph. So now my job is find t. Okay, I'm going to start and I'm going to divide both sides by 135. So 270 over 135 is 3 to the 4t. Well, 270 over 135 is just 2. And I just want to tell you, this will always happen if you're doing a doubling time problem. So a shortcut, if you want to, is to jump right to that, but I prefer to kind of just do it out. Now, the thing that we want, the t, it's tied up in the exponent. So anytime this happens, if the variable you want is tied up, you're going to probably be using a log to get it down. The reason is properties of logs let you bring the exponent in front. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write it in red so you can see what is different. I'm going to take the natural log of both sides. Now you could really use any base log you wanted. I just use ln because it's shorter to write and it's a button on my calculator. So properties of logs tell me that I'm allowed to bring the exponent down in front of the log. So I'm going to write this out for you now. I dropped the red, so just because it was getting a little crazy with all the colors. All right, so I have the following. Now I want to point out the key difference between the line before and this line is now t is on the same level as everybody else. It's not tied up in the exponent anymore. Now my goal is to get the t alone. So everything next to the t, the 4 and the ln of 3, I'm going to divide to the other side. So I have ln of 2 over 4 ln of 3, and that equals t. Now this is something I can just simply put on Wolfram Alpha or in my calculator. And if I do so, I get 0.1577. And just to be careful, let's go back to the problem prompt. Okay, so they didn't tell me anything about rounding. That's totally fine. I paid attention to the units. T was given in hours. And so when I answer my question, I want to write hours. This would be a great answer. Now, what is this saying? This is saying that after 0.1577 hours, so like 6 minutes or less, you have twice what you started with. And so I just want to point out that the coordinate that we didn't know before in the purple point is 0.1577. And again, my graph is not drawn to scale. I just wanted to show you what these different points mean. Okay, so on to part C of the problem. And the question is, when will there be 40,000 cells? Okay, so let's start the same way. We have our model that was given to us. And because I'm seeing, let me just kind of underline it, this when question, this is secretly telling me solve for t. Okay, so when will there be this many cells? What I'm going to do is replace Q of t with how many cells we're talking about. So that's the 40,000. And then my job is to solve for the t. Now the numbers are different than part C, or part B, but the moves are the same. What I'll do to start is divide both sides by 135. And you can actually divide it or just leave this symbolically as a fraction and let Wolfram Alpha deal with it. Now the thing I want, that t, it's trapped up in the exponent, and so the thing that will help me liberate it is a log. I'm choosing the natural log, but you can choose any log you like. And then I'm using properties of logs to bring the exponent down. And so let me write for you what we have now. So that exponent came down, and then this, we could reduce this fraction. I can tell quickly that 5 goes into both the top and the bottom. But since Wolfram Alpha can handle that, I'm just going to leave it. Now the thing I want alone is the t. So we will divide everything by what is next to the t on the right side. So I have this, and then over that, I need to have a 4 and an ln of 3. And that leaves my t alone. Okay, and so if I put this into Wolfram Alpha, I'm going to get 1.295, and I want to remember that hours is here. And let's go back to our original sketch And what this is saying is now you're at 1.295 for your time to hit that 40,000. So something to point out that's pretty cool about exponential functions is in the first bit of time, there was some growth, but it was not nearly as dramatic as in the next chunk of time. It's like as you go on in time with exponential models, the growth is speeding up. It's happening faster and faster. So that's very different than linear models, which we've met earlier in the class.